Hi there, it's Storyteller Mitch. I'm back reading Queer by William S. Burroughs. I know it's been a while since my last video. Just life, that's all I'm gonna get into really. You might see more cats coming across me. I adopted 2 more, and so there's 3 cats, and today I found another stray, but I'm not keeping that one. I gotta find out who they belong to. If not, they go to the shelter. But then I found out there is a waiting list for the shelter. So, looks like I gotta hang on to them for a bit or just find somebody for them. But anyway, you notice the screen's smaller. I'm using Game Show for this. Reason I am is because I don't know why, but the cam that comes with my laptop, when it records, it's not clear. You've probably seen in my last videos. In fact, you could probably see a shit ton of glare. Give me a second. That's not better. Hold on. I have my window open. Oh no, that's probably what you're seeing. I have my window open, my blinds open for, because I don't want my lamps on. And it's getting kind of dark soon. It's like 8 at night here. Okay. Chapter 7. They flew from Panama to Quito in a tiny plane which had to struggle to climb above an overcast. The steward plugged in the oxygen. Lee sniffed the oxygen hose. "It's cut," he said in disgust. They drove into Quito on a windy day, cold twilight. The hotel looked 100 years old. The room had a high ceiling with black beams and white plaster walls. They sat on the beds, quivering. Lee was a little junk sick. They walked around the main square. Lee hit a drugstore. No Paragoret without a script. A cold wind from the high mountains blew rubbish through the dirty streets. The people walked by in a gloomy silence. Many had blankets wrapped around their faces. A row of hideous old hags, huddled in dirty blankets that looked like old burlap sacks, were arranged along the walls of a church. "Now, son, I want you to know I am different from other citizens you might run into. Some people will give you the women are no good routine. I'm not like that. You just pick yourself one of these senoritas and take her right back to the hotel with you." Allerton looked at him. "I think I'll get laid tonight," he said. "Sure," Lee said. Go right ahead. They don't have much pulchritude in this dump, but that hadn't ought to deter you young fellows. Was it Frank Harris said he never saw an ugly woman till he was 30? It was, as a matter of fact. Let's go back to the hotel and have a drink. The bar was draughty. Oak chairs with black leather seats. They ordered martinis. At the next table, a red-faced American in an expensive brown garbing suit was talking about some deal involving 20,000 acres. Across from Lee was an Ecuadorian man with a long nose and a spot of red on each cheekbone, dressed in a black suit of European cut. He was drinking coffee and eating sweet cakes. Lee drank several cocktails. He was getting sicker by the minute. "Why don't you smoke some weed?" Allerton suggested. "That might help." Probably not. "Good idea. Let's go to the room." Speaking of one of the cats. Okay. Lee smoked a stick of tea on the balcony. "My God, it was cold out on that balcony," he said, coming back into the room. And when twilight falls on the beautiful cold colonial city of Quito, and those cool breezes steal down from the Andes, walk out in the fresh of the evening and look over the beautiful senoritas who seat themselves in colorful native costume along the wall of the 16th century church that overlooks the main square. They fired the guy, wrote that. There are limits, even in a travel folder. Tibet must be about like this, high and cold and full of ugly-looking people, and llamas and yaks, yak milk for breakfast, yak curds for lunch, for dinner a yak boiled in his own butter, and a fitting punishment for a yak too, if you ask me. You could smell one of those holy men 10 miles downward on a clear day, sitting there pulling on his old prayer wheel so nasty, wrapped in a dirty old burlap sacks, with bedbugs crawling around where his neck sticks out of the sack. His nose is all rotted away, and he spits betel nut out through the nose holes like a spitting cobra. Give me that wisdom of the East routine. Pardon the sniffles, 4 cats. So we got like a holy man, and some bitch reporter comes to interview him. He sits there chewing on his betel nut. After a while, he says no one of his acolytes, go down the sacred well and bring me a dipper of paregoric. I'm going to make with the wisdom of the East, and shake the head out of your loincloths. So he drinks the PG and goes into light trance, and makes cosmic contact. We call it going on the nod of the trade, the reporter says. Will there be a war with Russia, Mahatma? Will communism destroy the civilized world? Is the soul immortal? Does God exist? The Mahatma opens his eyes and compresses his lips and spits too long. Red streams of betel nut juice out of his nose holes. It runs down over his mouth, and he licks it back on with a long coated tongue and says, "How in the fuck should I know?" The acolyte says, "You heard the man, now cut. The Swami wants to be alone with his medications." Come to think of it, that is the wisdom of the East. The Westerner thinks there is some secret he can discover. The East says, "How the fuck should I know?" That night Lee dreamed he was on a penal colony. All around were high bare mountains. He lived in a boarding house that was never warm. He went out for a walk. He stepped off the street corner into a dirty cobblestone street. The cold mountain wind hit him. He tightened his belt of his leather jacket and felt the chill of his final despair. Lee woke up and called to Allerton. "Are you awake, Jean?" "Yes." "Cold?" "Yes." "Can I come over with you?" "Ah, well, all right." Lee got in bed with Allerton. He was shaking with cold and junk sickness. "You're twitching all over," said Allerton. Lee pressed against him, convulsed by adolescent lust of junk sickness. "Christ almighty, your hands are cold." When Allerton was asleep, he rolled over and threw his knee across Lee's body. Lee lay still so he wouldn't wake up and move away. The next day, Lee was really sick. They wandered around Quito. The more Lee saw of Quito, the more the place brought him down. The town was hilly, the streets narrow. Allerton stepped off the high curb, and a car grazed him. "Thank God you're not hurt." Lee said, "I'm sure hate to be stuck in this town." They sat down at a little coffee house where some German refugees hung out, talking about visas and extensions and work permits, and got into a conversation with a man at the next table. The man was thin and blond, his head caved in at the temples. Lee could see the blue veins pulsing in the cold, high mountain sunlight that covered the man's weak, ravaged face and spilled over the scarred oak table onto the worn wooden floor. Lee asked the man if he liked Quito. "To be or not to be, that is the question. I have to like it." They walked out of the coffee house and up the street to the park. The trees were stunted by the wind and cold. A few boys were rowing around and around and around. A few boys were rowing round and around in a small pond. Lee watched them, torn by lust and curiosity. He saw himself desperately rummaging through the bodies and rooms and closets in a frenzied search, a recurrent nightmare. At the end of the search was an empty room. He shivered in the cold wind. Allerton said, "Why don't you ask in the coffee shop for the name of a doctor? That's a good idea." Oy. The doctor lived in a yellow stucco villa on a quiet side street. He was Jewish, with a smooth, red face, and spoke in English. Lee put down a dysentery routine. The doctor asked a few questions. He started to write out a prescription. Lee said, "The prescription that works best is paregoric with bismuth." The doctor laughed. He gave Lee a long look. Finally he said, Tell the truth now." He raised a forefinger, smiling. "Are you addicted to opiates?" "Better you tell me, otherwise I cannot help you." Lee said yes. "Aha," said the doctor. He crumpled up the prescription he was writing and dropped it on the wastebasket. He asked Lee how long the addiction had lasted. He shook his head, looking at Lee. "Ach," he said, "you are a young person. You must stop this habit, so you lose your life. Better you should suffer now than continue this habit." The doctor gave Lee a long human look. My God, Lee thought, what have you put up with this, what you have to put up with in this business. He nodded and said, "Of course, doctor, and I want to stop, but I have to get some sleep. I am going to the coast tomorrow, to Manta." The doctor sat back in his chair, smiling. "You must stop this habit." He ran through the routine again. Lee nodded abstractedly. Finally, the doctor reached for his prescription pad. 3 cc's of tincture. The drugstore gave Lee paregoric instead of tincture. The cc's a PG, less than a teaspoon, nothing. Lee bought a bottle of antihistamine tablets and took a handful. They seemed to help a little. Lee and Allerton took a plane the next day for Manta. The Hotel Continental in Manta was made of split bamboo and rough boards. Lee found some knot holes in the wall of their room and plugged the holes with a paper. "We don't want to get deported under a cloud," he said to Allerton. "I'm a little junk sick, you know, and that makes me so sexy. The neighbors would witness some interesting sights." "I wish to register a complaint concerning breach of contract," said Allerton. "You said twice a week." "So I did. Well, of course the contract is more or less elastic, you might say. But you are right. Twice a week it is, sire. Of course, if you got a hot pants between times, don't hesitate to let me know. I'll give you a buzz." The water was just right for Lee, who cannot stand cold water. There was no shock when he plunged in. They swam for an hour or so, then sat on the beach looking at the sea. Allerton could sit for hours doing absolutely nothing. He said that boat out there has been warming up for the past hour. "I'm going into town to dig the local bodegas and buy a bottle of cognac," Lee told him. The town looked old. The limestone streets and dirty saloons crowded with sailors and dock workers. A shoe-shine boy asked Lee if he wanted a nice girl. Lee looked at the boy and said, "No, and I don't want you either." He bought a bottle of cognac from a Turkish trader. The store had everything: ship stores, hardware, guns, food, liquor. Lee priced the guns, $300 for a .30 lever action Winchester carbine that sold for $22 in the States. The Turks said the duty was high on guns. That was the reason for the price. Lee walked back along the beach. The houses were all split bamboo on a wood frame. The floor posts set secretly in the ground. The simplest type of house construction. You set 4 heavy posts deep in the ground and nail the house to the posts. The houses were built about 6 feet off the ground. The streets were mud. Thousands of vultures roosted on the houses and walked around the streets, pecking at offal. Lee kicked out a vulture, and the bird flapped away with an indignant squawk. Lee pressed a bar, a large building built directly on the ground, and decided to go for a drink. The split bamboo walls shook with noise. Two middle-aged, wiry little men were doing an obscene mambo routine opposite each other. Their leathery faces creased in toothless smiles. The waiter came up and smiled at Lee. He didn't have any front teeth either. Lee sat down on a short wood bench and ordered a cognac. A boy of 16 or so came over and sat down with Lee and smiled an open, friendly smile. Lee smiled back and ordered a refresco for the boy. The boy dropped a hand on Lee's thigh, squeezed it in. Thanks for the drink. The boy had uneven teeth, crowded one over the other. But he was a young boy. Lee looked at him speculatively. He couldn't figure the score. Was the boy giving him a come-on, or was he just friendly? He knew that people in Latin American countries were not self-conscious about physical contact. Boys walked around with their arms around each other's necks. Lee decided to play it cool. He finished his drink, shook hands with the boy, and walked back to the hotel. Allerton was still sitting on the porch in his swimming trunks and a short-sleeved yellow shirt, which flapped around his chin body in the evening wind. Lee went inside to the kitchen and ordered ice and water and glasses. He told Allerton about the Turk, the town, and the boy. "Let's go dig at the bar after dinner," he said. "And get felt up by those young boys?" said Allerton. "I should say not." Lee laughed. He was feeling surprisingly well. The antihistamine cut his junk sickness to a vague malaise, something he would not have noticed if he did not know what it was. He looked out over the bay, red in the setting sun. Boats of all sizes were anchored in the bay. Lee wanted to buy a boat and sail up and down the coast. Allerton liked the idea. "While you are in Ecuador, we must score for Yagi," Lee said. "Think of it, thought control. Take anyone apart and rebuild to your taste. Anything about bugs you, you say Yagi. I want that routine took clear out of his mind. I can think of a few changes that might make you new, doll." He looked at Allerton and licked his lips. "You'd be so much nicer after a few alterations. You're nice now, of course, but you do have those irritating little peculiarities. I mean, you won't do exactly what I want you to do all the time." "Do you think there's anything in it really?" Allerton asked. "The Russians seem to think so. I understand Yagi is the most efficient confession drug. They have also used peyote. Ever try it?" "No." "Horrible stuff. Made me sick like I wanted to die. I got to puke and I can't. Just excruciating spasms of the asparagus, or whatever you call that gadget. Finally, the peyote comes up solid like a ball of hair, solid all the way up, clogging my throat. As nasty a sensation as I have ever stood for. The high is interesting, but hardly worth the 6th stage. Your face swells around the eyes, and the lips swell, and you look and feel like an Indian. Or what you figure an Indian feels like. Primitive. You understand? Colors are more intense, but somehow flat and two-dimensional. Everything looks like a peyote plant. There's a nightmare undercurrent. I had nightmares after using it, one after the other, every time I went back to sleep. In one dream I had rabies and looked in the mirror and my face changed and I began howling. Another dream I had a chlorophyll habit. Me and 5 other chlorophyll addicts are waiting to score. We turn green and we can't kick the chlorophyll habit. One shot and you are hung for life. We are turning into plants. You know anything about psychiatry, schizophrenia? Not much. In some cases of schizophrenia, a phenomenon occurs known as automatic obedience. I say stick out your tongue, and you can't keep yourself from obeying. Whatever I say, whatever anyone says, you must do. Get the picture? A picture, isn't it? So long as you are the one giving the orders that are automatically obeyed. Automatic obedience. Synthetic schizophrenia, mass-produced order. That is the Russian dream. And America is not far behind. The bureaucrats of both countries want the same thing: control. The superego, the controlling agency, cancerous and berserk. Incidentally, there is a connection between schizophrenia and telepathy. Schizos are very telepathically sensitive, but are strictly receivers. Dig the tie-in? But you wouldn't know Yagi if you saw it? Lee thought a minute. Much as like the idea, I will have to go back to Quito and talk to a botanist at the Botanical Institute there. I'm not going back to Quito for anything, said Allerton. I'm not going right away. I need some rest and I want to kick the Chinaman all the way out. No need for you to go. You stay on the beach. We'll go and get the info. And now I'm on chapter 8. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this, you know the deal. Like, subscribe. Up to you. Okay? Have a good one.